Welcome to Knowledge 12, Lesson 8, where we're talking about Cesar Chavez, protector of workers' rights. And before we talk more about Cesar Chavez, let's go through our vocab words. I will read the word, you repeat it after me. Courage, balance, admirable, proud, challenge, boycott, extraordinary. Which one of these words means questioning whether something is right? Yeah, that would be the word challenge. Almost all of our people we've learned about have challenged or questioned whether something was right. What about someone who deserves lots of respect? That would be the word admirable. Again, as we review, we've learned about 6 people. Today is our last person we will be learning about. That will be Cesar Chavez. So after today's read aloud, you need to explain who Cesar Chavez was, explain the connections between Cesar Chavez and human rights for farm workers, and show an understanding of the word polite. Cesar Estrada Chavez was born in 1927 in the Gila River Valley near Yuma, Arizona. So right down here in Arizona is where he was born. As the second of 6 children, Caesar and his siblings loved to explore the golden desert and landscape, to gaze up at the sparkling desert sky that seemed to stretch on forever. Caesar was named after his grandfather, who had come to the United States from Mexico in the 1880s. Caesar's grandfather had settled on a small ranch in the Gila River Valley. This was the very same ranch on which Caesar and his family now lived and worked. The Chavez family worked hard and their farm was prosperous, which means thriving and making money. But then tragedy struck. Rain stopped falling in the Gila River Valley. First one year, then the next. Without rain, the crops could not grow, and the cattle died. This was also the time of the Great Depression, and Caesar's family, like so many others, lost their home. There was nothing else to do but sell the ranch. And so, when he was 10 years old, Caesar and his family moved to California to become migrant workers, people who traveled from farm to farm picking fruit and vegetables during harvest time. Like most migrant workers, Caesar and his family were poor and were often treated unfairly by the people who hired them. They were paid very little money for the work they did, and that work was very difficult. Caesar and his family, so they moved right there to California. Caesar and his family had to live in many different migrant worker camps. The camps were overcrowded, and many families had to share one bathroom. The Chavez family missed their ranch. They dreamed of going back to Arizona one day and buying back their home. However, migrant workers just earned a few cents a day for the back-breaking work that they did. There was no chance of ever being able to save money. Caesar's family was considered to be Hispanic because they were originally from the Spanish-speaking country of Mexico. Hispanic or Latino people, just like African Americans, faced discrimination and segregation. However, Caesar's family celebrated their Mexican heritage and spoke Spanish, the language of their ancestral home. Although it wasn't easy, Caesar did go to school in various places in California. In fact, he went to more than 30 different schools. He later said that he was lucky to have graduated from middle school because his family moved around so much. Later in his life, Caesar told a story about an incident that happened to him at school. One day, Caesar accidentally spoke Spanish instead of English in his classroom. His teacher was not happy with him, and Caesar thought that he had done something wrong. Caesar felt he had been treated unfairly, and it made him sad. It was not possible for Caesar to on to high school. He was needed to work in the fields. However, during the World War II, Caesar wanted to serve his country. He joined the Navy, and his family was very proud of him. After 2 years in the U.S. Navy, Caesar returned to life as a migrant farm worker. Soon after his return, Caesar met and fell in love with Helena Fabela. The couple married and moved to San Jose, California. Caesar was one of the many Latino people who worked as migrant workers, moving from farm to farm, harvesting fruits and vegetables. The work was so hard and the hours were so long that many workers found that their health suffered. Why do you think the workers suffered from bad health? Well, yeah, they probably weren't getting the proper rest and they were probably working very long hours with very little breaks. And that's what they did. They worked 7 days a week, often 14-hour days a day for very little pay. Normally, people work 8 hours a week in 5 days. If they were injured or became sick, they found it difficult to pay medical bills. These migrant workers were only employed during harvest time, and of course, migrant workers did not earn money when bad weather prevented them from working, while waiting for crops to ripen or when they traveled from job to job. Caesar believed that something had to change. He believed that these migrant workers deserved to be treated more fairly. He set out to change the treatment of farm workers, and especially migrant workers in California. One day, Caesar met an organizer for a social service group known as Community Service Organization, also known as the CSO. This organization also wanted to improve the lives of Latino people. Caesar volunteered to be a CSO community organizer. He went from farm to farm, some farm workers, helping some farm workers with their day-to-day problems and instructing others on how to become US citizens. He encouraged all farm workers to register to vote, and he helped to register thousands of new voters. To register means to sign up to vote. Immediately, some of the farm owners thought that Caesar was a troublemaker. Caesar was shy. He did not like speaking in front of large groups of people, but he knew that his work was important. He became the leader of a new CSO group in California. In addition to speaking Spanish, Caesar spoke very good English. As a result, he was able to communicate with both farm owners, most of them who spoke English, and farm workers, most of them who spoke Spanish. Slowly, many farm workers became brave enough to attend meetings and rallies organized by Caesar. Without intending to, Caesar had become a labor leader and a civil rights activist. Caesar believed that all farm workers needed a union to represent their best interest. A union is a large organized group of workers who join together and elect leaders to speak for them. The union leaders try to make sure that their members' needs are being met. Caesar knew that a union would have the power to increase wages or pay and provide health care for farm workers. And so he and his friend Dolores Hureta decided to set up a union called the National Farm Workers Association. Caesar said, "You are never strong enough that you don't need help." And the union was intended to provide that help. Within 2 years, they had 1,000 members. Caesar thought Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had the right idea about protesting in a nonviolent way. He decided to do the same thing. Caesar led marches, fasts, and boycotts, but never violent protests. One of the most important farm workers' strikes Caesar led was against grape workers in California. So strikes are like stoppages of work that continue until an employer and the worker agree on things such as wages, better working conditions, and other things. At the time, Caesar said, "The fight was never about grapes or lettuce. It is always about people." The strike began in Delano, California, where grape growers had decided to cut the little pay the farm workers received, so the workers were earning even less money. Caesar responded by organizing not only a strike but a protest march too. Thousands of farm workers set off for the state capital of Sacramento. They walked for hours each day in the hot sun. More and more workers left the vineyards and joined the march. People across the nation noticed what was happening. Many people refused to buy California grapes in sympathy for the plight of the workers. A plight is a bad situation. While the farm workers were marching, they weren't harvesting or picking the grapes. The farm owners watched in horror as their precious crops withered and died on the vine. They discovered that without their workers, they would lose money. The farm workers recognized Caesar's union and agreed to discuss higher wages and health care for farm workers. The farm workers' march to Sacramento became the longest protest march in American history. This was indeed a victory, but there was more work to be done. Caesar defended farm workers and migrant workers in many other cases of unfair treatment. Thousands of people joined his union. His union opened offices all over the country. Eventually, Caesar's union became known as the United Farm Workers. Later the United Farm Workers protested against grape owners who used pesticide or poisons intended to kill insects, mice, and rats on their crops. These pesticides harmed workers who harvested grapes. Caesar called for another boycott of California grapes. Throughout his lifetime, Caesar dedicated himself to working for the rights of poor migrant farm workers who seemed to have no voice in society. Caesar died in 1993. Thousands of people attended his funeral. 1 year after his death, Caesar was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. His wife, Helene, accepted the award. During his lifetime, Caesar often encouraged his fellow farmworkers by saying, "Si se puede," yes, we can, and he certainly did. So, what is the connection between Cesar Chavez and the human rights for farm workers? Well, remember, the basic human rights was fair jobs, food, and uh, proper shelter, and that's exactly what he fought for these farm workers. They weren't getting paid nearly enough, and they um, were living in just very harsh conditions, and he was helping to better their lives. Our word word for today is the word plight. I will read the word. You repeat it after me. Plight. So plight is a very difficult or bad situation. So Eleanor Roosevelt was saddened to see the plight of all the people without jobs during the Great Depression. So describe to me the plight of any of the groups of people we have heard about in this unit. One of the plights we could talk about was the plight on the bad situation or the plight that women were facing during Susan B. Anthony's time where they weren't able to have a voice or able to vote. I'm going to read a sentence. We're going to respond if that is a plight or that is not a plight. When victims of an earthquake need to rebuild their damaged homes, that is a plight. When a team wins a sports tournament, that is not a plight. When a family takes a walk together in the park, that is not a plight. When birds lose their habitat or homes because of forest fire, that is a plight. And the last person we learned, someone who followed up after Martin Luther King Jr., we put on this timeline, we put on Cesar Chavez. Okay, we got one more read aloud together that where we'll be talking about and summarizing the different people we have learned